When we learned the Pledge of Allegiance way back in elementary school, we were taught that the United States was a country that offered liberty and justice for all. This is a great ideal that should define our nation's progress as we move into the future. However, there is one foul, stark injustice that has plagued our nation ever since the Constitution was written in 1787. That injustice is the Electoral College, a system for selecting a president that is as undemocratic as it is arcane. As I will illustrate in this speech, the Electoral College spits in the face of the principle that every person's vote should be of equal worth and is the source of innumerable other bills. But, as I will also be explained, it can be changed, and that change can start with people just like you. But before I get into the need for change, I should make sure we're all on the same page by detailing what exactly the Electoral College is and why it was created. To excerpt from the part of the Constitution that establishes the college, each state shall appoint, in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct, a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress, and no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. What that basically means is that when you vote for president, you're not actually voting for president. You're voting for an elector who will then vote for the president for you. And in every state except for Maine and Nebraska, the majority winner in the state gets all of the electors for that state. The electors are generally selected by the party. They're generally party loyalists just to make sure that they actually vote for the candidate they're supposed to. And the reason the college was established, it was mostly part of a concession to slave states. If you remember from your history class back in elementary school, there was a thing called the 3/5 clause. It said that 3/5 of the state's slaves would be counted when they're apportioning representatives. So by allotting the same presidential election by the number of representatives, it gives the southern states a bigger influence. And some legal scholars I found, they wrote that for 32 of the Constitution's first 36 years, a white slave-holding Virginian occupied the presidency. So you can see that it actually did work this way. And the other reason was they were concerned that voters might not be informed enough about the presidency or the candidates to select wisely. Like the media and communications wasn't as advanced in those days, but they've come a long way since then, so that justification doesn't really exist, and obviously neither does slavery. But having gone over the history, I guess it's time to say why it's undemocratic. And I think most people would agree that the fairest form of democracy is one that follows the principle of one man, one vote. Every person's vote is worth the same amount as others, but under the Electoral College, that's not really true. If you ever paid attention to the news during an election, you're probably familiar with the terms red states, blue states, and swing states. Here's the results from 2004. I selected this year because it was like very traditional lines. Like you can see the West Coast and Northeast, and parts of the upper Midwest are blue states, and other parts of the country, usually red states. And the swing states, they're generally Florida and Ohio are the big ones, and a couple others as well. And but the problem with the Electoral College is that votes in swing states are given a lot more importance than votes in other states. Just one example I found written from a journalist who wrote in Mother Jones that during the 2000 campaign, 17 states didn't see the candidates at all, such as Rhode Island and South Carolina, because those states generally, like Rhode Island is a so-called blue state, and South Carolina a red state, so like the Republican candidate generally takes South Carolina for granted, and he knows that there's no way he's going to win Rhode Island, so he just doesn't bother to go there, and it's vice versa for the Democratic candidate. And another severe problem with the Electoral College is the issue of faithless electors. Although electors are technically supposed to follow the results of the people in their state, in most states there's no law that actually requires them to do this, so they really could vote for anyone. Like for example, in 2004, if you notice the little 1 in Minnesota, that's because one foolish elector accidentally voted for John Edwards to be president instead of John Kerry. Like, just imagine if that happened in a close election. This is another example. In 1976, Ford's team, they thought the election was going to turn out to be really close, and if that, like a very close loss for them, so they had plans to try to convince other electors to switch to their side. But it ended out Jimmy Carter won by a larger margin than they thought he would, so that didn't really happen. And finally, you can win the Electoral College without winning a majority of popular votes. So you can have a president that a majority of voters do not want. That happened 3 times in 1876, 1888, and 2000. Nevertheless, there are still a few arguments in favor of the Electoral College that I should address. Probably the most common one is it prevents small states from being ignored. I don't think that's really true. Like, if you look at the smallest states are Vermont and Wyoming, but those are generally, like, Wyoming's considered a red state or Vermont a blue state, so they don't get candidate visits anyways. And that's the same for many other small states. And another thing is image. Like, even if we did get electoral college, candidates would probably want to visit small states just to maintain the image that they're paying attention to the whole country. Just some token visits would count. Even if it did happen, the small states still have a tremendous influence in the Senate, so there wouldn't be any concern about them not being representative in the federal government anyways. And another argument, to read from an essay in support of the college written by someone from the Cato Institute, he wrote that the Electoral College makes sure that the states count in presidential elections by strengthening their role in our federalist system. This is also wrong. Because, like, right now, whether one person in the state votes or every person in the entire state votes, the state gets the same amount of say. So there's no really turnout, there's not really any motivation for them to try to increase voter turnout. If we got rid of the Electoral College, every state would try to maximize the turnout in their state so that future candidates would know that that's a state worth paying attention to. So a popular vote would give the states a much more constructive role to play. And there's also the issue of independent candidates. Under the Electoral College, it's almost impossible for an independent candidate to win. Like, for example, Ross Perot in 1992, he won 20 million popular votes, but not a single electoral vote. And some people might find it desirable for independent candidates to win, and if that's you, that's a very good reason to oppose the Electoral College. But anyways, like, other people will say it brings stability, so they're for maintaining it, but the same scholars I mentioned earlier, they made an analogy comparing it to state governor elections. None of those use a system akin to the Electoral College, but still there are no independent governors, so I think that effect is also largely exaggerated. And I guess the final argument in his favor is that we should just keep it because that's how the founders wanted it. But I always think of this as if they wanted us to keep it exactly the same, they wouldn't have put in a process for amendments in the Constitution. And if we go to a popular vote, then every person's vote will truly matter the same. Like, no longer will conservatives in blue states or liberals in red states be ignored, or the same, like, other voters won't be taken for granted. Everyone's vote will matter equally. And some of you may be thinking that you're just college students, what can you do to change this? It's true that only the government can institute a constitutional amendment, but there is a long history in the United States of amendments supported by popular movements. For example, the 19th Amendment was encouraged by women who wanted to be able to vote. The 18th Amendment, prohibition, because people wanted to get rid of the evils of drinking. And a couple of years later, they changed their mind and introduced the 21st Amendment, which re-legalized drinking. And finally, the 26th Amendment, during the Vietnam era, people thought that if they were able to go get drafted and risk death, then they should be able to vote. So they lowered the age to 18. So there is a long history for this, and a clear precedent for changing exists. And so clearly it can be done if people unite in their opposition to the college and make their opposition known. We can inspire a switch to a popular vote and bury the anti-democratic abomination known as the Electoral College once and for all. And if you're interested, I have the websites and addresses for those are the senators for Pennsylvania and the congressmen for our area. So thank you. Are there any questions? All right, thanks.